Hello and welcome to Ruben Uncut. Today's topic, paleo diets are pseudoscience. Yep, that's right. I'm here to talk to you about paleo diets. Now, you may have heard of the paleo diet. It's another one of those no processed foods diets, which, let's be clear up front, that's good. In fact, any diet that promotes the concept of eating whole foods, that's a huge positive and will probably help you overall in your health, because processed foods are bad for you. And paleo diets, initially anyways, do help you to cut out processed food. But you might be saying, Ruben, what do you mean paleo diets are pseudoscience? What I mean is, the paleo diet was not created by a scientist. In fact, the paleo diet were created by just people. Quick edit here. As you will see, I'm going to contradict something I just said there, which is that they weren't a scientist. Technically, they were a scientist, but they were a sports medicine scientist, not not an archaeologist or scientist who would have, studied early man. So yes, it's more that they were not the right kind of scientist to really know anything about this, who had no historical knowledge or scientific things to back up their beliefs about paleo diets. Now, you see, I don't even have to dig that deep here. You see, the reality is that what archaeological studies show us is that mostly early human beings ate whatever was in their environment, which means that some of them ate more meat and some of them ate more vegetables and plants. Meanwhile, the people who made the paleo diet, I can assure you of some things, never looked into what early man actually ate. In fact, they probably just assumed that people were out here eating like the Flintstones. The concept behind the paleo diet is, of course, for people to eat like early man. Now, this means to avoid things that are highly processed, which is fair. Highly processed foods are not good for you. And early man probably didn't have a lot of access to quote-unquote processed foods. That being said, not everything on the paleo diet makes sense, and we'll get into that more in a minute. But the basic gist of the idea behind the paleo diet is to eat like a cave person, which, by the way, is fucking impossible, because it is. I'm sorry, were you going to the store to pick up woolly mammoth meat? Do you know a place that has that? What about saber-toothed tigers? What about the fact that experts now find that cavemen were probably mostly vegan? Wait, what? This comes to us from The Independent on Yahoo News. A new study has debunked the general meal plan behind the paleo diet, with findings suggest that some Stone Age people ate mostly vegan diets. According to Harvard School of Public Health, the paleo diet was adapted to mimic the nutritional plan adopted until 2000 BC. The paleo diet, also referred to as Caveman or Stone Age diet, includes lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. The university explains proponents of the diet emphasize choosing low glycemic fruits and vegetables, even though dates are allowed, which are not a low glycemic fruit. Most of the diet is centered around protein intake, promoting the consumption of grass-fed beef for its omega-3 content, even though cows are a domestication that no caveman would have had access to in that time period, because the cows that we consider cows today didn't fucking exist. In general, the idea is to consume foods that are available during the Paleolithic period for health benefits, such as our genetics and anatomy have changed very little from the time per the SPH. Of course, the thing is cows weren't available back then. The animals we think of as cows today are the product of hundreds of years of domestication. And we actually have been gradually homogenizing cows for hundreds of years. Slowly, things like different types of cows and chickens go extinct on farms all the time. Why? Because we slowly breed them into one homogenized animal. I don't mean we breed chickens into becoming cows. I mean, slowly all the chickens become one type of chicken and all the cows become one type of cow. With me so far? Let's continue. Now, a study published by the Nature Ecology and Evolution Journal researched and analyzed the chemical signature of Paleolithic groups. The Ibermaricines, specifically, with bones and teeth. Their findings suggest the general idea of meat being the primary source of protein during this time isn't valid. Stable isotope analysis was used, focusing on the nitrogen and zinc isotopes in teeth, enamel, and collagen to look at the meat consumption associated with the Ibermauricines, as well as carbon isotopes to discover whether meat or fish was the primary source of protein. Our analysis showed that these hunter-gatherer groups, they included an important amount of plant matter, wild plants, to their diet, which changed our understanding of the diet of pre-agricultural populations. Zeneb Mabataliji, I deeply apologize, I can't pronounce your name, the lead author of the study stated, additionally, researchers saw an abundance of cavities in buried remains in the Tafralat caves, the places where Ibaramarisans would lay the dead to rest. According to the study, these cavities suggest the consumption of fermentable starchy plants like beets, corn, rye, and cassava. Clervia, with our apparently no white people apparently involved in this study. A co-author of the studies noted that the high proportion of plants in the diet of pre-agricultural population was unusual. However, their findings weren't indicative of the protein intake for all individuals in the Stone Age. Still, Jowan, maybe, pointed out that this was the first finding by isotope techniques that saw a significant plant-based component in Paleolithic diets. So, there you have it. It's worth noting that the people who invented the paleo diet also weren't the first people who came up with this idea. What is the difference between the primal diet and the paleo diet, you might be wondering? Well, the answer is actually dairy and legumes. Well, the primal way of eating allows for them, provided that you tolerate them well. The primal way of eating is also intricately tied to the other primal pillars of movement and lifestyle. Oh, wait, no, this is not the old primal diet. This is what the new primal diet. It doesn't matter. Adrian Rose Johnson writes that the idea of the primitive diet was superior to current dietary habits dates back to the 1890s, with such writers as Emmett Densmore and John Harvey Kellogg. Densmore proclaimed bread is the staff of death, while Kellogg supported the diet of starchy grain-based foods in accord with the ways and likings of our primitive ancestors. Arnold de Vries advocated an early version of Paleolithic diet in his 1952 book, Primitive Man and His Food. In 1958, Richard McCarness authored Eat Fat and Grow Slim, which processed low-carbohydrate Stone Age diet. In his 1975 book, The Stone Age Diet, gastroenterologist Walter V. Vogtlin advocated meat-based diet and low proportions of vegetables and starchy foods, based on his declaration that humans were exclusively flesh eaters until 10,000 years ago. Note the fact that being a gastroenterologist would not give you that information. In fact, we just read a study indicating that that's probably bullshit. In 1985, Stanley Boyd Eaton and Melvin Connor published a controversial article in the New England Journal of Medicine proposing that modern humans were biologically very similar to their primitive ancestors and so genetically programmed to consume pre-agricultural foods. Eaton and Connor proposed a discordance hypothesis by which the mismatch between modern diet and human biology gave rise to lifestyle diseases such as obesity and diabetes. The diet started to become popular in the 21st century, where it attracted a largely internet-based following using websites, forums, and social media. The diet's ideas were further popularized by Lauren Cordain, a health scientist with a PhD in physical education, which is not the same thing as, history, who trademarked the words paleo diet and who wrote the book, a 2002 book of that title. It's worth noting that this gentleman also believed that the cavemen had superior exercise to us. However, actually, they didn't, and they had chronic osteoporosis-based problems. Some diseases and ailments were more common in prehistory than they are today. There is evidence that many people suffered from osteoarthritis because probably caused by lifting of heavy objects, which would have been a daily necessary task in their society. By the way, that's the type of exercise that Corden wants you to do. In 2012, the Paleolithic diet was described as being one of the latest trends in diets based on the popularity of diet books about it. In 2013 and 2014, the Paleolithic diet was Google's most searched weight loss method. The Paleolithic or Paleo diet is also sometimes referred to as the Caveman or Stone Age diet. Adopting the Paleolithic diet assumes that modern humans can reproduce hunter-gatherer diet. Of course, that would be very difficult to do. The data for Curdane's book came from 6 contemporary hunter-gatherer groups, which means he compared contemporary hunter-gatherers' diets to the diets of early man, which doesn't make sense as a data set. Mainly living in marginal habitats. One of the studies was on the Ikung, or Kung, whose diet was recorded for a single month, and one was on the diet of the Inuit, a tribe of people who live far away from plants. Due to these limitations, the book has been criticized as painting an incomplete picture of the diets of Paleolithic humans because it doesn't look at any Paleolithic humans. It has been noted that the rationale for the diet does not adequately account for the fact that due to the pressures of artificial selection, most modern domesticated plants and animals differ drastically from Paleolithic ancestors. Likewise, our nutritional profiles are very different from their ancient counterparts. For example, wild almonds produce potentially fatal levels of cyanide. But this trait has been bred out of domesticated varieties using artificial selection. Many vegetables, such as broccoli, did not exist in the Paleolithic period. Broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and kale are modern cultivars of the ancient species Brassica oleracea. Let's talk about some of the things you can eat on the paleo diet, because it doesn't actually make sense if you believe the caveman hype bullshit. Paleo-friendly food list. Grass-fed or wild-caught beef. There's no such thing as wild-caught beef. It's a largely domesticated animal. Unless you're going to plan on replacing all the cow in your diet with bison, I think that's a little insane. Chicken, a highly domesticated animal whose ancestors, we don't even know what they looked like. Cod, I don't know much about cod. Pork is a highly domesticated animal. In fact, pigs are predators. They are carnivore animals that human beings forced to become omnivores. They're highly domesticated. Chickens are also an animal that has changed a lot since the early days of chicken. In fact, chicken used to be a bird preferred for things like soup stocks. Why? Because it didn't have a lot of meat on them. You know what did have a lot of meat on them? Bigger birds like goose, turkeys, and ducks. It is almost a 21st century thing that chicken is so prevalent. Of course, they insist they be chickens raised without antibiotics, which I assume would mean you also have to get beef without antibiotics. Now, the fruits and vegetables are where things get real stupid real fast. Let's talk about them. First of all, the first things listed are cauliflower, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts, which we just read about, are all highly domesticated plants that cavemen had zero access to, because that plant, we basically changed that plant to produce like 20-something different plants that we could eat. Sweet potatoes, which is a tuber. Interesting, you're allowed to have that. Butternut squash, cabbage, also highly domesticated. Spinach, domesticated. Paleo fruits, apples. Bitch, apples are one of the most domesticated fruits we have. Did you know that every apple seed has the potential to grow a completely unique apple tree species based on the soil it's grown in? But we don't grow apples that way. Instead, we do what's called cloning, where we take a branch of one apple tree that we like, and then we plant that branch somewhere else. It, to be fair, also produces a tree faster. Berries including blackberry, blueberries, blah, 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 blah. Melons, grapes, bananas. I have seen some lists say you can't have bananas. So I'm a little bit confused in the bananas, but bananas are also highly domesticated. In fact, the version of bananas that are not domesticated have seeds all throughout them. And actually, types of bananas have at various points gone extinct. The banana you eat today is actually, which by the way is also currently at risk of going extinct for the exact same reason the previous most popular type of banana went extinct. The reason banana candies taste different than real bananas is that banana candies are still flavored like a type of banana that no longer exists. Citrus fruits, peaches, and plums. Now it says that eggs are allowed. Now we get into nuts and seeds, and this is where shit really don't make no fucking sense whatsoever, paleo people. Almonds, like we just read, had to be domesticated because they used to be, because to cave people, they were fucking poison. Poison! Walnuts, I would have to double check it, but I think those used to be poisonous too. Macadamia nuts, pecans, hazelnuts, pine nuts, Brazil nuts, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, and flax seeds. Now, it's worth noting that legumes are not allowed by paleo diets because legumes contain what is considered an anti-nutritional property that is bad for you. Now, to be fair, proper cooking of legumes actually removes this property from them. But the reason it comes across as hypocritical is because many nuts and seeds, including ones on this list, also contain the exact same properties. Because legumes are, and this might blow your mind, a type of seed. Now, there are more domesticated type of seed, although arguably not more domesticated than fucking almonds. But next we come up with healthy oils. And this is where shit also gets stupid. I didn't mention this, but a pretty obvious problem with the oils section, of course, is that the history of wooden cold-pressed oil is traced back to the Indus Valley civilization. Evidence of apparatus of cold-pressed oil was found in the ruins of Harappan civilization, which is approximately 5,000 years old, and is still a common sight in most rural areas. Meaning that any oil, healthy or not, would not have been things cavemen had. In fact, if cavemen were frying anything in anything, it might have been animal fat. There is no such thing as a Paleolithic cold-pressed oil. We have no evidence for it. We've got olive oil, walnuts, flaxseed oil, macadamia oil, avocado oil, and coconut oil. Now, the first one I'm going to draw your attention here to is olive oil, because olives are a domesticated food. And I don't just mean the way we grow them. I mean the fact that all olives are processed. All olives are processed. You have not had a raw olive. Harvested olives must be cured to remove the bitterness in order to make them palatable. The most common curing processes uses brine, dry salt, water, or lye treatments. During these curing processes, the water-soluble oleuropein compound is leached out of the olive flesh. Harvested olives may be milled to make oil or cured for food production. Olives cannot be consumed direct from the tree. They are too bitter without curing. The raw fruit is bursting with oleuropein, a bitter compound that must be removed prior to eating. So it's pretty fucking wild that you can have olives. The ultimate reality here is that the man who created paleo never fucking studied cave people. Also, the evidence that cave people suffered from less chronic disease as us is also sketchy at best. We know for a fact they had, like I just said earlier, osteoarthritis. They also had spina bifida, and Down syndrome has been found in their DNA as well. And just so you know, the study is real, by the way. I did check to see if the link went to anything, and we do have data here. I could go over this with you, but it would be pretty fucking dry. And to be honest, I wouldn't know what some of it meant. but I can read you the conclusion. Our study highlights the importance of the Taffaralt population's dietary reliance on plants. While animal resources were consumed in lower proportions than at other upper Paleolithic sites with available isotopic data. The potential early weaning of infants at Taffarlate reinforces the notion of plant-based food focus for the population, potentially extending to the primary source of nutrition for infants. However, it is crucial to acknowledge that the further comprehensive investigations are neither to fully understand these findings and their implications. Evidence of intensive exploitation of wild plants at the end of the late Pleistocene is also documented in the Near East with Natufian hunter-gatherers who developed cultivation and became some of the earliest agriculturalists. In that region, it is believed that younger Dryas climatic deterioration in the early Holocene, 11 to 10 to 10300 UNCAL BP, was the major trigger for systemic cultivation and in response to the reduction of vegetal cover and consequently the availability of exploited wild plants. Which, if I'm understanding that correct, and I could be wrong on this, it sounds like people adopted agriculture to gain control over the plants they were dependent on. Although the Naturfurian and Ibero-Maurician populations, I'm probably horrifically mispronouncing those, had broad similarities regarding the preconditions for the emergence of food production, intensive plant consumption, and increased sedentism and genetic connection. 63% of shared genes between Natufian and Ibero-Maurician individuals. Essentially, these tribes were related to some extent. These factors did not lead in North Africa to a similar local development of agriculture and farming, despite the high reliance on plant foods as a staple during the later Stone Age. While the origin of this dissimilarity is still open to debate, the younger Dryas cooling phase might have reduced the abundance of plant resources, which would explain why Ibero-Maurician sites became less occupied during the period. Let's take a look real quickly at foods to avoid on the paleo diet. Cereal grains, legumes, refined sugar, processed foods, soda and sweetened beverages, refined vegetable oils, salt, and artificial sweeteners. Now, it's worth noting that yes, you can get some of these paleo oils pressed, which is not considered refined. But it's also worth noting you can get every single one of these refined as well. Once again, we have to talk about the legumes because A, the thing that's supposed to be bad about legumes is also true for a majority of seeds and nuts, but also the data for legumes being bad for us isn't really there. In fact, according to studies that research longevity, in America, the group with the largest longevity is in Seventh-day Adventist commune in California, where people live to be super old. Why is that important? Well, it's important because Seventh-day Adventists believe it's against the will of God to eat animals, and they have a heavily legume-based diet. In fact, legumes are connected to some of the longest living people on the planet, and yet this diet would like you to remove them because cave people didn't have peanuts. Let's see what it actually says here about legumes. Legumes are members of a large family of plants that have a seed or pod. This category includes all beans, peas, lentils, tofu, and other soy foods and peanuts. It's worth noting that soybeans are the only complete protein-based plant. This also includes peanut butter and soy sauce. Legumes are not allowed on paleo because of their high content of lectins and phytic acid. These things are also commonly found in nuts and seeds and can be greatly reduced when you fucking cook them. Similar to grains, this is controversial in the scientific community. There's no evidence to back up the fact that it will help you live longer. In fact, lots of research, including a 2021 study published in Nutrients, supports eating legumes as part of a healthy diet because they are low in fat and high in fiber, protein, and iron. Now, the reality about a lot of whole food diets is that initially they work. Initially, whole food diets work. And the reason is that you're cutting out a lot of processed meat and processed sugar, things that are known to be pretty harmful to our health. But there is a reality to these diets, whether you're talking about Atkins, whether you're talking about vegan, whether you're talking about paleo. And that reality is that one day you will wake up and the foods will no longer be whole. I have bad news for you. Cave people didn't eat waffles. They have grain-free flour now, and paleo candy bars, and paleo waffles. One day you wake up and suddenly you have all these options. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I like Bob's Red Mills as far as things go. But let's be real for a minute. Cave people didn't have almond flour, arrowroot starch, or coconut flour. Not to mention tapioca flour. If you think cave people had access to these things, I'm sorry, but you're dumb as hell. No matter what diet you're on, eventually someone will come around and make fucking junk food for it. And then you'll eat it, and the diet will slowly start to lose its efficiency in society. But the reality of the paleo diet is ultimately this. It's not based on anything real. It's not even based on fucking cave people. The guy who made this, the guy who invented this, didn't even research early man. He researched contemporary tribes that exist today. And his selection of them was biased as hell, choosing Inuits who have a 99% animal fat-based diet, and also people who live in deserts, which necessitate the eating of animal protein. It's fucking mind-bending. So yes, paleo is bullshit. Now I know what you're gonna say. You're like, Ruben, what about keto and Atkins and all of them? Also bullshit. In fact, keto, Atkins, and paleo are often listed near the bottom of diets recommended by actual dietitians. What's the most popular diet that's considered healthy? The Mediterranean diet. Look into it. Now, I'm not saying you should trust doctors and dietitians, even though hypothetically they know more than the guy who came up with this. But I would ask you to look into early caveman development. They didn't eat like the Flintstones. What they ate was heavily dependent on the environment they were in. And I've got bad news about paleo. It is impossible to eat like a caveman. The animals they ate have all changed. The plants they eat have all been domesticated. This is a fantasy on par with that giant rib of dinosaur that the Flintstones are chomping on. That's the reality. Paleo is just something somebody made up to sell a book. But what else is fucking new in this society? This is what happens when you don't do good research. Also, your body kind of designed to use carbs. In fact, high meat, high protein, high fat diets aren't great for men. Men's bodies are designed to burn sugar. It's part of testosterone. Now, I'm not saying you should be pumping your ass full of sugar all the time, men, but the reality is that your body expects to have sugar. Sugar and glucose regulate some of your brain and nerve functions. And actively doing keto while also being physically active can actually damage your metabolism, because when you're a man, being physically active expects your body to be burning sugar, because that's the way your body works. Also, the idea of us being super genetically similar to early man is pretty wild, since early man has, had interspecies breeding between them and Neanderthals. And most current research indicates that Neanderthals ate plants, primarily. Now, to be fair, the reality is this. Cavemen lived a long time ago, and the research that we've done on it basically indicates that they ate whatever was around them. And for many of them, that meant plants. And for some that lived in areas without plants, it meant meat. And at the end of the day, it's a diet based on nothing. Literally nothing. It's also worth noting that diets like keto and, say, the carnivore diet aren't for everyone. Keto being primarily a diet invented to help people who had seizure disorders and potentially might have benefits for bipolar disorders as well, isn't really meant for everyone. And then, of course, you have the carnivore diet, a diet that was invented for people with extreme autoimmune disorders. It's also worth noting that the carnivore diet will also, make it so that you're at a higher risk of dying of scurvy. Oh, what's scurvy? Well, scurvy is, just a disease you get when you don't eat enough fruits and vegetables so you can have vitamin C in your diet. Just some things to think about. Just some things to think about. Well, thank you for tuning in to Ruben Uncut. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe on YouTube or follow on Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. You can email the show at rubenuncut@gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever, whenever you are.